The Buddhist masters learned that the heart cannot be rushed. When we slow down, we see more clearly. When we stop reaching for the next moment, this one becomes full. When we stop trying so hard to find peace, we notice it has been here all along. Tonight, we will sit with teachings and stories from Zen Buddhism that have brought people peace for thousands of years. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. As we journey together, there is nothing to remember, nothing to write down. Just listen and let the words come and go as they will. Settle in and take a slow, deep breath. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. In the Buddhist tradition, there is a figure known as the Bodhisattva of compassion. She goes by many names across the cultures that have carried her story forward, but her essence is simple. She is the one who hears and listens. This tells us something important about how the Buddhist tradition understands compassion. We tend to think of compassion as something active, something we do for others. We give advice. We solve problems. We offer words of comfort. But the oldest teachings suggest that compassion begins somewhere quieter. It begins with the willingness to be still and receive what another person is carrying. You cannot hurry this kind of attention. It asks us to set down our own plans, our own responses, our own restless need to move things forward. The heart that truly listens must first slow down. It must let go of what it was about to say and simply be present with what is being said. The Buddha himself taught that there are many forms of generosity. We can give food. We can give shelter. We can give safety. But one of the highest forms of giving, he said, is the gift of our full attention. Let us explore a story about this kind of listening. It takes place in a monastery, high in the hills, where the mornings were cold and the days moved slowly. A boy arrived at the monastery when he was 7 years old. He came with a small cloth bag and a pair of sandals that were already too tight. His parents had brought him to the gates, spoken quietly with the head monk, and then walked back down the long stone path. The boy stood in the courtyard and watched them go until they were just two small shapes on the road below, and then just the road, and then just the hills. The monastery was large and quiet and full of rules he did not understand. He was shown where to sleep, where to sit, when to eat, when to be silent. The older students moved through the halls with a calm that seemed beyond him. They knew where to go. They knew what came next. He felt like he was always one step behind, always arriving late to the wrong place. He cried on the first night, and the second. By the third night, he had learned to do it quietly so the boy in the next bed would not hear. In his first week, he met the gatekeeper. She was an old woman who sat on a low wooden stool beside the main entrance. Her job was to open the heavy doors at dawn and close them at dusk, and to greet anyone who arrived. It did not seem like much of a job. Most days, nobody came at all. One afternoon, the boy was wandering the outer corridors, holding his hand against his chest. He had been helping to carry firewood, and a splinter had gone deep into his palm. It stung badly, and his eyes were wet, but there was nobody to tell. The older boys had not noticed. He did not want to bother the monks. He found himself near the gate. The old woman looked up from her stool. "What happened to your hand?" she said. He held it out. She took it gently and looked at it with her full attention, the way someone looks at something that matters. "Wait here," she said. She went into the small room behind the gate and came back with a strip of clean cloth and a paste that smelled of earth and herbs. She wrapped his hands slowly. "Does it still sting?" she asked. "A little," he said. "Good. That means it is healing. The sting is the healing." He sat with her for a while after that. She let him stay. The courtyard was quiet. The afternoon light moved across the stones. It was the first time since arriving that he had felt he was allowed to simply be somewhere without needing to do anything at all. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Over the weeks and months that followed, the boy found his way to the gatekeeper whenever something weighed on him. She was always there on her stool, and she always had time. He came to her when the older students laughed at the way he held his broom during the morning chores. He arrived red-faced and trying not to cry. She listened. Then she said, "When you first picked up a broom, did you know how to hold it?" "No," he said. "And now?" "I hold it wrong." "That is what they said. You hold it the way you learned. Tomorrow you will hold it differently. And the boys who laughed will have forgotten by then. They are too busy worrying about their own brooms." He almost smiled at that. He came to her when the morning chants confused him, when the other boys seemed to know the words while he stumbled and fell behind. "I cannot keep up," he told her. "My mouth cannot move that fast." "Then slow down," she said. "But I will be behind everyone else." "You will be behind everyone else," she agreed. "But you will hear what you are saying. That is worth more." He came to her on a night when sleep would not come and the darkness felt too large. He had crept out of the sleeping hall and wandered toward the gate, hoping the cool air might help. He found her sitting on the steps outside her small room, wrapped in a blanket, looking up at the sky. "Why are you awake?" he asked. "I am old," she said. "Old people do not need as much sleep. Sit down." "Why are you awake?" "I do not know. My mind will not stop." "What is it doing?" "Thinking." "About what?" He paused. "About tomorrow, and the day after, and whether I will ever be good at anything here." She was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Your mind has run ahead of you. It has gone to tomorrow, but you are still here in tonight. Can you feel the ground under your feet right now?" He pressed his bare feet against the cool stone. "Yes." "Good. Stay with that for a while. The ground is not going anywhere, and neither are you." He sat with her until his eyelids grew heavy. Then he went back to bed and slept through until the morning bell. One morning in autumn, the boy found a small bird lying in the courtyard. It had fallen from somewhere above the kitchen roof and lay still on the stones, its feathers ruffled by the wind. He picked it up carefully. It was light and cold. He carried it to the gatekeeper. "Why do they sing so much?" he asked her, "if they are only going to end up like this?" She looked at the bird in his hands for a long time. She did not answer right away. That was something he had come to trust about her. She never rushed her answers. She let the question breathe until the right words arrived. "Perhaps they sing because the morning is here," she said. "And for a bird, that is enough." He thought about this. "But the morning will end." "Yes," she said. "It will. And another morning will come. And there will be singing in that one too." He buried the bird beneath a tree near the outer wall. He smoothed the earth with his hands and sat there for a while, listening. Somewhere in the branches above him, another bird was calling out as if nothing had happened. And perhaps, in the way that mattered most, nothing had. He did not fully understand the gatekeeper's words yet, but he kept them tucked away the way you keep something you know you will need later. The years passed. The boy grew tall and quiet and steady. He learned the chants. He learned to sit still without fidgeting. He learned the rhythms and silences of the monastery until they became his own. At 16, he was chosen to continue his studies at another monastery far across the mountains. It was an honor. The head monk told him he was ready. On the morning he left, he stopped at the gate. The gatekeeper was older now. Her hair had gone completely white, and she moved more slowly. But she sat on the same stool, and when she saw him standing there with his traveling bag, she smiled. "You are leaving," she said. "I am." "Good. The world is wider than this courtyard. It is time you saw some of it." He stood in front of her and wanted to say something about what she had meant to him, about all the afternoons by the gate, the splinter and the broom and the bird, and the nights when she had helped him feel the ground beneath his feet. But he was 16, and the words would not come the way he wanted them to. So he simply bowed, deeply and slowly, and walked through the gate. She watched him go. She sat on her stool and watched, the way she did everything, with patience, without hurry. Many years later, the young man came back. He had studied in other monasteries. He had walked through cities and along rivers and through forests where the trees blocked the sky. He had taught students of his own. He had sat with people in their grief and in their confusion and in their small joys. But something in him still carried the memory of that gate and the old woman who sat beside it. He arrived on a cool morning. The stone path was the same. The courtyard was the same. The bell rang the way it had rung when he was 7 years old, standing there in his too tight sandals, watching his parents disappear down the road. The gate was open. A young monk sat on the stool where she had always been. "I am looking for the woman who used to keep this gate," the traveler said. "She was here for many years." The young monk's face softened. "She passed in the spring," he said quietly. "She was very old. She was still here almost to the end." The traveler stood in the gateway and let the words move through him. He had carried a conversation with her for years, turning it over in his mind on long roads and quiet nights. He had imagined how he would sit beside her again, how he would finally tell her what her presence had meant during those early days when everything felt too large and too strange. He had thought there would be time. "She left something," the young monk said. "She told us that someone might come back one day, asking for her. She said he would look like a grown man, but she would know him as a boy." The young monk reached into a wooden box beside the stool and took out a small piece of folded cloth. Inside it was a scrap of paper with a single line written carefully. It read, "The birds are still singing." The traveler held the note for a long time. Around him, the monastery was waking up the way it always had. The bell, the sweep of brooms on stone, the soft sound of feet on wooden floors, and somewhere above the courtyard, in the branches of the old tree near the outer wall, a bird was singing. He stood there and listened. There was nowhere else he needed to be. This story is about the most generous thing one person can offer another. Simpler than advice, simpler than wisdom. It is the willingness to be present, fully and without hurry, with whatever someone brings to us. The gatekeeper offered the boy something he could not find in the teachings, or the chants, or the discipline of the monastery. She offered him her attention, and in being truly heard, he found that the ground beneath him was solid after all, that he was not as alone as he thought. There is a teaching in the Zen tradition that says, attention is the most basic form of love. We hear this, and it sounds simple, perhaps too simple. But consider the moments in your own life when you felt most held, most safe. Chances are, someone was simply paying attention to you. They were not solving anything. They were just there, and they were listening, and that was enough. The Buddha once said that an entire spiritual life can be built on the foundation of good friendship. He called it admirable friendship, and he meant something deeper than casual companionship. He meant the kind of presence where one person makes room for another, without judgment, without hurry. This is what happens when we slow down enough to truly listen. Something in the other person relaxes. They feel, perhaps for the first time in a while, that they can simply be what they are, and that is enough. You cannot hurry the heart into this kind of generosity. It is the opposite of hurry. It asks us to set aside our own story long enough to hold someone else's. This is why it is rare, and this is why it matters so deeply when we find it. We can begin to practice this in small, ordinary ways. In the next conversation we find ourselves in, wherever it happens, we might try arriving just a little more fully, setting down whatever we are holding, letting the other person finish, waiting one breath before we speak. We do not need to be gatekeepers at a monastery. We do not need to be especially wise or especially patient. We only need to slow down enough to hear what is actually being said. And sometimes, what is not being said. The boy carried the gatekeeper's words for the rest of his life. They stayed with him because they were offered with full attention, in moments when he needed to be heard. And that is something a person never forgets. Let us take a breath here. Notice where you are, how your body feels, what is present. Whenever you are ready, we will continue together. One of the oldest lines in Buddhist scripture comes from the Dhammapada, a collection of sayings attributed to the Buddha himself. It says, roughly, with our thoughts, we make the world. It is a simple line, easy to agree with, but it carries something deeper than it first appears. The Buddha is pointing to something most of us do every day without catching ourselves. We experience the world not as it is, but as we interpret it to be. And we do this so quickly, so automatically, that we mistake our interpretations for the truth. Someone looks at us a certain way and we decide what they are thinking. Someone is quiet and we fill that silence with our own explanation. A person does something unexpected and we have a full story about their character before they have even finished doing it. The interpretation arrives before the moment has settled, and once it arrives, we treat it as fact. We react to it, build on it, carry it forward. We rarely stop to ask whether any of it actually happened the way we think it did. When we are in a hurry, this process speeds up even more. The rushed heart grabs the first available story and builds a fortress around it. There is no time to look again. There is no pause between what we see and what we decide it means. And this is where so much of our unnecessary suffering begins, in that tiny, unexamined space between what happened and what we told ourselves about it. The Buddhist tradition has spent thousands of years exploring this space. What the teachers discovered there is both humbling and freeing. They found that most of the time, we are reacting to a world we invented. The event itself is usually small. The story we wrap around it is enormous. And the tradition approaches this discovery with compassion rather than blame, because it is simply what minds do. The question is whether we can learn to see it happening. Let us explore a story about this. It takes place at a small inn along a trading road, the kind of place where travelers would stop for a meal and a few hours of shade before continuing on their way. A woman arrived one afternoon, dusty and sore from several days of walking. She stepped inside, grateful for the coolness, and spoke to the innkeeper. "A bowl of rice, please," she said. "It will be a few minutes," he told her. "We are busy today." She found a spot at one of the long wooden tables near the door and set her bag beside her feet. Across the table, a man was sitting quietly, a traveler by the look of him, with worn clothes and a calm, weathered face. A bowl of rice sat in front of him. She gave him a glance and then looked away. She was tired and hungry and thinking about the miles still ahead of her. The inn smelled of cooking oil and wood smoke. Through the open windows she could hear the sound of a cart passing on the road outside and someone calling out prices at a market stall. It was the kind of place that felt lived in, warm and slightly chaotic, where nobody stayed for long. She leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the noise wash over her. Her feet ached. Her shoulders were stiff. She was looking forward to the rice more than she had looked forward to anything in days. After a few minutes, the innkeeper brought a bowl and placed it on the table. She picked up her chopsticks and began to eat. Then the man across from her reached over and took some rice from the bowl. She froze, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. He was chewing calmly, eyes lowered, as if nothing unusual had happened. She stared at him. A flush of heat crept up her neck. Surely she had misread the situation. Surely he had made a mistake and would realize it in a moment. She waited, but he did not look up. He did not apologize. He simply chewed. She pulled the bowl closer to her side of the table and took another portion. He reached over and took more. She ate again. He ate again. Each time he reached for the bowl, her confusion gave way to a slow, building frustration. She found herself watching him more closely than she meant to, trying to make sense of it. Who does this? Who sits across from a stranger and eats their food without so much as a word? Between bites, she began assembling a portrait of him. He was selfish. He felt entitled to whatever was in front of him. He had probably never been told no in his life. She noticed his plain, worn traveling clothes and decided he was the kind of man who took what was available because he could not provide for himself. And then her mind did what minds do. It began to build. She started connecting this moment to other moments, other situations where she had been taken advantage of. A merchant who had overcharged her 2 towns back. A fellow traveler who had borrowed her water skin and returned it nearly empty. It all became part of the same story. The world was full of people who took, and she was the kind of person who let them. She imagined telling someone about this later, how outrageous it was, how she had sat across from this shameless stranger and watched him eat her food with a straight face. She could already hear herself recounting the details. The indignation felt almost good, like scratching an itch. There was something satisfying about being so clearly in the right. All of this unfolded in silence. The inn was noisy around them. Other travelers talked, laughed, called for more tea. And these two sat across from each other, eating from the same bowl, locked in a conflict that only one of them knew was happening. She opened her mouth to say something. Twice. Both times the words caught behind her teeth. The confrontation felt too large, too unpredictable. Better to swallow the insult and replay the scene later, on the road, where she could finally say all the things she wished she had said. The bowl was nearly empty now. The man looked up at her for the first time. His expression surprised her. It held no hostility. If anything, there was warmth in it, and something that looked like gentleness. He scooped the last of the rice into 2 even portions and pushed one half toward her with a small nod. Then he ate his share, picked up his bag, and walked out into the afternoon light. She sat rigid, hands flat on the table. He had divided her rice with her, as if he were being generous, as if she should be grateful. A moment later, the innkeeper appeared at her side. "Apologies for the wait," he said, and placed a full steaming bowl of rice in front of her. "Here you are." She looked at the fresh bowl, then at the empty one sitting in the middle of the table, then at the door, where the light was still bright and the road stretched on, and the man had already disappeared. It had been his bowl. From the very first bite, she had been eating his food. Every handful she had taken with such indignation, every sharp look she had aimed across the table, every unflattering detail she had stitched into her story of his character, all of it built on one small, simple mistake. She had reached for the wrong bowl. The man who had quietly shared his meal with a stranger, who had split the last of his rice and offered her half without a word of complaint, was already gone. Walking down the road, perhaps a little hungry, perhaps mildly puzzled by the woman who had eaten most of his lunch, she sat alone with 2 bowls in front of her, one empty, one full, and a strange new feeling settling into the space where all that certainty had been. She thought about his face in that final moment. The warmth in it. The gentleness she had dismissed as nerve. He had been kind to her. He had shared his meal with a stranger who was reaching across the table and eating it without asking, and he had responded by dividing what was left and offering her half. She had spent the entire meal constructing a villain out of a generous man. She picked up her chopsticks and began eating the fresh bowl of rice. It tasted fine, but something about the meal had changed. The appetite that had been so sharp when she arrived was gone, replaced by something quieter. She was seeing, perhaps for the first time in a long while, how quickly and completely her mind had built a world that did not exist. How real it had felt. How certain she had been, and how wrong. The Buddha gave a teaching that belongs right beside this story. He spoke about 2 arrows. The first arrow, he said, is the event itself. Something happens. Someone reaches for our bowl. A person speaks in a tone we did not expect. Plans change without warning. The first arrow may sting, but it is usually small, and it passes quickly. The second arrow is the one we fire into ourselves. It is the story we build around the event. He did this deliberately. She does not respect me. They never listen. This always happens. The Buddha said that the second arrow causes far more pain than the first. And the remarkable thing about it is that we are always the ones who fire it. The woman at the inn was struck by a small, confusing event. Someone ate from a bowl she believed was hers. That was the first arrow, and it was tiny. But in the minutes that followed, she fired second arrow after second arrow. She constructed a complete portrait of a man she had never spoken to. She felt indignation, certainty, and the quiet satisfaction of being in the right. She carried all of that, and none of it was based on anything real. The Buddhist tradition has a name for this kind of cascade. The teachers called it mental proliferation, and it describes how one moment of contact with the world can set off an avalanche of judging, interpreting, and reacting that carries us far from what is actually happening. One misunderstanding becomes a drama with heroes and villains. One wrong bowl becomes a silent war. And we build the entire thing ourselves, thought by thought, story by story. What makes this teaching so useful is that it does not ask us to stop thinking. The Buddhist tradition is realistic about this. Thoughts arise. Stories form. That is what minds do. The practice is simply to notice when it is happening. To catch the second arrow in flight, even just once, and choose not to fire it. The Buddha compared the untrained mind to a wild horse, pulling us wherever it wants to go. We do not tame it by fighting it. We tame it by learning to watch it with patience and clarity. The first step on the Buddha's eightfold path is called right view, and it is placed first for a reason. Before right action, before right speech, before anything else, the Buddha asks us to see clearly, to look at what is actually in front of us rather than at what we have decided is there. Right view begins with a kind of humility, the willingness to admit that our first reading of a situation might be incomplete or simply wrong. You cannot hurry the heart toward this kind of seeing. When the heart is rushed, it grabs the nearest explanation and locks it in place. Understanding asks for something the hurrying mind finds very difficult to give. A pause, a single breath between the event and the response, a willingness to hold the situation loosely enough that the truth has room to show itself. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. We become experts in our own stories so fast. We are so certain of our reading of people and situations that we stop looking. We stop wondering. And the cost is that we miss what is actually there. Beginner's mind is what the woman at the inn lost the moment she reached for that bowl. She became an expert on the man across from her within seconds. She knew who he was, what he was like, what he deserved. And every one of those conclusions was wrong. If she had held even a sliver of uncertainty, if she had looked at the situation with fresh eyes even once during the meal, she might have noticed the second bowl. She might have noticed his kindness. But certainty is comfortable, and beginner's mind asks us to give that comfort up. How many of the frustrations we carry are truly about what happened, and how many are about the story we built afterward? How many people have we judged on evidence we never stopped to check? The wrong bowl is more common than we like to admit. Most of us are sitting across from someone right now, in some area of our lives, eating their rice and blaming them for it. The Buddha's teaching on the two arrows is, at its heart, an invitation. We may not be able to avoid the first arrow. Life will surprise us. People will confuse us. Bowls will end up in the wrong place. But the second arrow is always a choice. And in the moment where we pause before firing it, there is room for something truer and kinder to take its place. Let us rest here for a moment. Let whatever is moving through you settle on its own. When you feel ready, we will go on. Most of the time, when something difficult arises, we have options. We can distract ourselves. We can stay busy. We can plan our way around the problem or push through it by force of will. These strategies work often enough that we come to rely on them. We keep moving, and the difficulty eventually fades behind us. But every now and then, life takes those options away. It sits us down in a room with nothing but what is happening, and it closes the door. The plans stop working. The distractions run out, and we are left with what the Buddhist teachers would call the bare experience of this moment, without a story wrapped around it, without a strategy to manage it. Just this. The Buddhist tradition teaches that this is not a punishment. It is an opening. When everything else falls away and we are left with only what is here, something surprising can happen. We discover that the present moment, even a difficult one, is workable. It is bearable. Often it is quieter than we expected. The suffering we feared was not coming from the moment itself. It was coming from all the stories we were telling about what might happen next. There is a phrase that appears in the Buddhist teachings, passed down through generations of monks and teachers. It is simple enough to seem ordinary. Right now, it is like this. But in that one line is a complete practice, a way of meeting experience that asks nothing of us except honesty. Whatever is arising right now, it is like this. Let us explore a story about what happens when someone is forced to stop. It is the story of a traveler, a man who spent his days walking from village to village, teaching and offering guidance to those who asked for it. He was steady and disciplined and used to movement. His days had structure. There were always people expecting him at the next stop, lessons to prepare, conversations to continue. He carried a quiet pride in his reliability. When he said he would be somewhere, he was there. One autumn, while walking a mountain road between two villages, a fever found him. It started as a heaviness in his legs, a warmth behind his eyes. By midday, he was shivering. By evening, he could barely stand. He reached a small village at the base of the mountain, and a family there took him in. They gave him a room at the back of their house, a thin mattress on the floor, a blanket, and a window that looked out onto a courtyard where chickens scratched in the dust. A woman from the family brought him water and a broth that tasted of ginger. "Rest," she told him. "The fever will pass when it is ready." "How long do these fevers usually last?" he asked. She shrugged gently. "Sometimes a day, sometimes longer. The body knows what it needs. You just have to let it work." This was not the answer he wanted. He wanted a number, a timeline, something he could plan around. But she had already turned to leave, and he was too tired to press further. And then he was alone. The room was small and plain. A water jug sat in the corner. Through the window, he could see the mountains he had been crossing, and, beyond them, the road he could not walk. He lay on the mattress and looked at the ceiling and felt the fever moving through him in slow waves. His body ached. His skin was damp, but it was his mind that gave him the most trouble. It started immediately. He was supposed to be in the next village by now. People were waiting. He had promised a family there that he would help with the ceremony. He had told a young student he would continue their lessons. What would they think? Would they worry? Would they assume he had forgotten? Then his mind leapt further. How long would this last? A day? A week? What if the fever worsened? What if he could not travel for the rest of the season? What about the villages after the next one and the one after that? His mind raced down the road ahead of him, visiting every stop he was supposed to make, watching each one fall apart without him. He felt restless in a way that had nothing to do with the fever. His body wanted to be still, but his mind would not allow it. He lay there, caught in a web of futures that had not happened yet, and felt a weariness that had nothing to do with the fever. It was the weight of all those imagined tomorrows pressing gently on a body that was only living through today. He spent the first day like this, tangled in plans and worries, mentally reaching for solutions that kept slipping out of his hands. He tried to calculate when the fever might break. He tried to rehearse messages he could send. He tried bargaining with his own body, promising rest later if it would just cooperate now. He lay there composing explanations for the people waiting for him, going over each one in his mind, editing and revising, as if getting the words right would somehow make the situation less real. The woman came at midday with water and a cloth for his forehead. "Is there someone I can send word to?" she asked. "If you need to let people know where you are." "There are people in the next village expecting me," he said. "But I do not know what to tell them. I do not know how long I will be here." "Then tell them you do not know," she said. "That is the truth, and the truth is always enough." She placed the cloth on his forehead. It was cool and smelled faintly of mint. He wanted to argue with her, to explain that the truth was not enough, that people were counting on him, that plans were falling apart. But the coolness of the cloth felt so welcome that he simply closed his eyes instead. By afternoon, his mind had exhausted itself but would not stop. Every thought led to another thought. Every worry opened the door to a larger one. He felt further from peace than he had felt before the fever began, and he realized with a kind of quiet surprise that his mind was making him more tired than his body was. None of it worked. The fever stayed. The room stayed. The ceiling stayed. On the second morning, something shifted. He was lying on the mattress, watching the light from the window move across the floor, and a thought arose that was different from the others. It did not come from the planning mind or the worried mind. It came from somewhere quieter. It said, "What if there is nothing ahead?" He stayed with it. What if, just for now, there is nothing ahead? No next village. No obligations. No road. Just this room. Just this light. Just this breath. He tried it. He let go of tomorrow. He let go of the road. He let go of the ceremony and the student and the people who might be worried. Just for a few seconds, he released all of it and let himself be only here. Something eased. The tightness in his chest loosened. The room did not feel so small. Then a thought about the future came back, as thoughts always do. And with it, the tightness returned. He noticed this. He noticed it clearly. When his mind went to the future, even slightly, his body contracted. When he came back to just this moment, just the mattress, just the sound of chickens outside, just the warmth of the fever in his skin, the contraction released. There was still discomfort, The fever was real. His body ached. But the anguish, the heavy, pressing anguish that lived somewhere else, it lived in tomorrow. It lived in next week. It did not live here. He began to practice with this. Each time his mind reached forward, he brought it back. Gently, without force. And he gave himself a phrase to anchor the return. It is like this. His body ached. It is like this. His skin was hot. It is like this. He was alone in an unfamiliar room. It is like this. Fear arose. It is like this. He said it to himself dozens of times that morning, dozens more that afternoon. There was nothing dramatic about it. It was not a moment of blinding clarity. It was more like learning to walk along a narrow trail. He kept stepping off, and he kept stepping back on. Off and back on. Again and again. But something accumulated. Each time he returned, the landing was a little softer. Each time he said, "It is like this," and actually felt the truth of it. A small space opened around whatever he was experiencing. The discomfort was still there, but it was held in something wider. It was held in his willingness to be with it rather than flee from it. The woman from the family came in the evening and brought more broth. She looked at him and said, "You seem calmer." "I am trying something," he said. "What is that?" "I am trying to stop reaching for tomorrow." She nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. "Tomorrow will come whether you reach for it or not," she said. "You might as well let it arrive on its own." She left the broth and went out. He drank it slowly. Through the window, the sky was turning the color of ash. He could hear the family talking softly in the next room, the ordinary sounds of a household settling into evening. And for a few minutes, listening to those sounds, he felt something he had not expected to feel. He felt held. By the room, by the voices, by the simple fact that someone had brought him food and spoken to him kindly. It was like this, and it was enough. By the third day, the practice had become familiar. His mind still reached forward, still threw up images of the road and the obligations waiting there. But the time between each pull grew longer. The returns came more easily. He began to notice that even the discomfort in his body changed quality when he stopped resisting it. The ache in his muscles, when he simply allowed it, became a kind of warmth. The heaviness became a kind of rest. He was not fighting the illness anymore. He was letting it move through him, and it asked less of him than the fighting had. The fever broke on the fourth morning. He stood slowly, washed his face, and sat in the courtyard in the early sun. He felt thin and light, as if something unnecessary had burned away along with the fever. The woman who had cared for him brought him tea. He held the cup in both hands and watched the steam rise. "Thank you," he said, "for the room, for the broth, for leaving me alone when I needed it." She smiled. "You were not so hard to care for. You mostly just lay there." "I was doing more than it looked like," he said. She laughed at that. A kind, easy laugh. He would remember it later, on the road, as one of the good sounds of that week. When he left the village that afternoon, he walked more slowly than he used to. Not because he was weak, though he was, but because he had learned something about speed. He had learned that the faster he moved, the more his mind moved with him, reaching ahead, pulling him out of where he was and into where he had not yet arrived. The slower he walked, the more of the road he actually saw. But what stayed with him, long after his strength returned, was not the illness itself. It was what he had found inside of it. A discovery so simple it almost seemed too obvious to say aloud. The suffering he had feared was not in the moment. It was in the future his mind kept building. When he stopped building, even briefly, what remained was bearable. Often, what remained was simply quiet. This is what the Buddhist teachers point to when they speak about the nature of our minds. We suffer, they say, not because life is unbearable, but because we project our fears forward in time and then react to the projection as if it were real. The Buddha taught that suffering arises in the gap between what is and what we wish were different. When we close that gap, even for a breath, when we say, "It is like this," and allow the moment to be what it is, something in us settles. The Buddha had a word for this kind of meeting. He called it tathata, which is sometimes translated simply as suchness. It means things as they are, before we add our preferences, our resistance, our demands that they be different. Suchness is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is something closer to honesty. It is the willingness to see clearly and to start from where we actually are, rather than from where we wish we were. There is a teaching from the Buddhist tradition that says our whole practice comes down to meeting our edge and softening. Heart be where it is, even when where it is feels uncomfortable. You cannot hurry the heart through fear. When we try to push past it or think our way around it, the heart tightens further. It closes. But when we stop, when we allow things to be as they are, when we say, "It is like this," with even a small amount of gentleness, something begins to open. On its own, in its own time, as the body heals a fever when we stop interfering, the heart opens when we stop forcing it shut. The traveler carried this phrase with him for the rest of his years. He used it on difficult roads and in difficult conversations and in ordinary moments that suddenly turned sharp. He did not use it to make things better. He used it to be honest about how things were. And he found, again and again, that honesty was the doorway to something he could not have reached through effort alone. The present moment asks very little of us. It asks only that we show up for it, that we stop running toward the next one long enough to feel this one. And when we do, when we are fully here, what we often find is that this moment, even a hard one, holds more space than we imagined. More stillness, more breath, more room for the heart to do what it has always known how to do, which is to open. Let us pause here and take a breath. Feel the ground beneath you. Notice whatever is here, just as it is. And when you are ready, we will continue. A student once asked a Zen master, "What is the way?" The master replied, "Ordinary mind is the way." The student pressed further, "Should I try to direct myself toward it?" "If you try to direct yourself toward it," the master said, "you will move away from it." This exchange has been passed down for over 1,000 years in the Zen tradition, and it still puzzles people who hear it for the first time. We are so accustomed to the idea that peace requires effort, that we must do something to earn it. Meditate long enough, read enough, practice enough, and eventually, after all that work, we will arrive at some state of calm that has been eluding us. The Zen tradition says something different. It says that the peace we are looking for is already here, woven into the ordinary texture of this moment. In the breath, we are already breathing. In the sounds, we are already hearing. We do not need to add anything to the moment. We just need to stop assuming that something is missing. This is a hard teaching to trust. Everything around us says the opposite. Everything says we should be doing more, improving, producing, advancing. That a moment spent just sitting is a moment wasted. That rest must be earned, and even then, the rest should probably be useful in some way. You cannot hurry the heart into believing that this moment is complete. It has to discover this for itself. And sometimes, the discovery comes from the most unlikely teacher. There is a story about an old man who lived alone at the edge of a village. He had been a teacher for most of his life, well respected, with students who traveled from distant places to study with him. His wife had been beside him through those years, a steady and warm presence who kept the household running while he taught. They had lived a full life together. When she passed, quietly, during the spring, something in his daily rhythm changed. He did not fall apart. He simply slowed down. He stopped teaching. He let most of his books go. He spent his days tending a small garden, making tea, and sitting on the wooden bench outside his door in the late afternoon light. His former students worried about him. They sent messages. A few made the journey to visit. They were not sure what to make of this new version of their teacher, this man who seemed content to do almost nothing at all. One of them, a young man who had since become a busy and well-regarded teacher himself, decided to visit. He arrived on a warm afternoon and found the old man exactly where he expected, sitting on the bench, watching the light change across the courtyard. "Teacher," he said, bowing, "I came to see how you are. That is kind of you." "Sit down," the old man said, and gestured to the bench beside him. "You look like you have been walking fast." "I have," the young man admitted. "I have a great deal to do when I get back." "You always did," the old man said, and smiled. They sat together for a while. The young man noticed how simple the house had become. The shelves that had once been full of scrolls and papers were nearly bare. The room behind the open door held a mattress, a cushion, a tea set, and not much else. The garden was small, but carefully tended. A pot of tea sat on a low table near the door, still warm. "Are you eating well?" the young man asked. "Well enough. The neighbors bring things. I cook a little. And are you lonely?" "Ah." The old man considered this. "Sometimes I miss her voice," he said. "In the mornings especially. She used to talk while she made the tea, just about small things, what she had dreamed, what the weather would do. I did not always listen carefully enough. I wish I had listened more." He paused and looked at the garden. "But lonely?" "No, I would not say lonely. Are you bored?" "Bored." The old man repeated the word as if he were examining something from a distance. "No, I do not think I am bored." The young man looked around the courtyard again. The empty path, the quiet garden, the tea cooling in the afternoon light. He could not help the question that came next. It rose from the part of him that believed a life needed to be full of activity to have meaning. "But teacher, what do you do all day?" The old man did not seem offended. "I wake up," he said. I make tea. I sit outside if the weather is fair. I eat when I am hungry. I watch the birds in the garden. Some days I walk to the river and back. I do not do a great deal. And that is enough for you? The old man turned to look at him directly. His eyes were clear and unhurried. At my age, he said, you do not need to be doing a great deal. Just being here is enough. The young man sat with this. He wanted to understand, but something in him pushed back. He was 32 years old. He had students, obligations, plans for the coming months. Even now, sitting on this bench, part of his mind was already calculating the distance home and how much daylight he had left. The idea of just being, without purpose or direction, without something to show for it at the end of the day, felt almost unsettling to him. Perhaps you could take on a few students again, he offered. Even just one or two. People still ask about you. That is generous, the old man said. But no, I have said what I had to say. Others can carry it now. He poured 2 cups of tea from the pot and handed one to the young man. Drink this. It is better while it is warm. The young man took the cup and held it in both hands. The tea was simple, slightly bitter, with a faint sweetness underneath. He drank it slowly, which was unusual for him. He usually drank tea the way he did most things, quickly, while already thinking about the next task. Can I ask you something? The young man said. Of course. When you sit here all day, what is it that you actually notice? I mean, what do you see that you did not see before, when you were busy? The old man thought about this. I notice more, he said. That sounds simple, but it is true. I notice the way the light changes through the afternoon. How it starts here, he pointed to one side of the courtyard, and moves all the way over there by evening. I notice how the birds come and go in patterns. I notice the taste of my food. When I was teaching, I ate quickly between lessons. I could not have told you what I had for lunch most days. Now I know exactly what I am eating, and I enjoy it. He paused. I notice my own thoughts more too. They come and go. Some days they are busy. Some days they are quiet. I used to be pushed around by them. Now I watch them arrive and leave, and I do not always follow where they want to take me. That sounds peaceful, the young man said. It is, the old man agreed. Though it took some time. The first few weeks after she passed, the quiet was very loud, if that makes sense. My mind did not know what to do without all the activity. It kept looking for things to worry about, things to plan. But when there is nothing to plan, eventually the mind settles. It is like a bird that has been circling and circling and finally finds a branch to land on. I will tell you something, the old man said, after a while. Everything you do, every lesson you teach, every conversation you have with your students, it will be better if you can find even a few minutes in your day to stop doing and just be here. Just this. The tea. The air. Your own breathing. It does not need to be long. But without those minutes, you will spend your whole life arriving somewhere and never quite feeling like you are home. The young man was quiet. Then he said, You were not always like this. When I studied with you, you were busy from morning until night. I was, the old man agreed. And I missed a great deal because of it. I was a good teacher, I think. But I was not always here. I was often somewhere else in my mind while sitting right beside someone. Right beside her. He looked at the empty space on the bench between them and then at the garden. I am here now, and I can tell you that being here is not the empty thing I expected it to be. It is quite full, just not in the way I would have predicted. A breeze moved through the courtyard, and the leaves of the garden rustled softly. Somewhere in the branches above, a bird was singing. The young man sat on the bench with his empty teacup and noticed, with some surprise, that he was not thinking about the road home. He was just sitting, just here. And it was, for that moment, enough. He stayed longer than he had planned. There is another Zen story that lives right beside this one. A monk once came to a great master and asked for instruction. "Have you eaten your rice?" The master asked. "I have," the monk replied. "Then wash your bowl." That was the entire teaching. Have you eaten? Then wash your bowl. Do what is in front of you, fully, and let that be complete. The rice is worth your full attention. The bowl is worth your full attention. The washing is worth your full attention. Each ordinary moment deserves to be met as if it were the only one. This is the heart of what the Zen tradition calls shikantaza, which means, simply, just sitting. It sounds like the easiest thing in the world, and it is one of the hardest. Because just sitting means sitting without trying to get anywhere, without meditating in order to become calm, without practicing in order to become wise, without adding anything to the moment or taking anything away. Just this, just here. Most of us, when we sit down, are still going somewhere. Our body stops, but our mind continues traveling. We are reviewing the past or rehearsing the future or narrating the present. Shikantaza asks us to let all of that fall away, to trust that this breath right here is the whole of our life. The Zen master Dogen wrote that sitting itself is the practice of enlightenment. He did not mean that sitting leads to enlightenment. He meant that sitting, fully and without agenda, is enlightenment. This moment, fully lived, is the destination. There is nowhere else to go. The old man on the bench had found his way to this through the long, slow process of letting go, through losing the person he loved, through watching his students grow and leave, through the quiet accumulation of mornings where the only task was to make tea and drink it. He had not arrived at some grand spiritual achievement. He had simply stopped running and discovered that the place he had been running toward was underneath him the whole time. The Zen master Dogen once wrote, "If you are unable to find the truth right where you are, where else do you expect to find it?" We hear this and our minds want to resist. Surely the truth is somewhere deeper, somewhere harder to reach. But what if he meant it as simply as he said it? What if the peace we are looking for is not at the end of a search, but in the willingness to stop searching? What if the only thing between us and that peace is the belief that we need to be somewhere else? Most of us will not wait until we are old to discover what the old man found. We do not have to. The Zen tradition teaches that this understanding is available to anyone, at any age, in any circumstance. It does not require a quiet house at the edge of a village. It does not require retirement or solitude or loss. It only requires a willingness to pause, even briefly, and let this moment be what it is, without needing it to be more. There is a Zen saying, "Sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes, and the grass grows by itself." We read this, and our busy minds want to argue with it. Surely we have to do something. Surely the grass needs tending. But the Zen masters are pointing to something that the old man understood in his bones. Life does not require our constant management. The spring comes whether we are rushing around or sitting still. The grass grows without our supervision. And we, when we stop long enough to notice, are already part of the unfolding. We do not have to earn our place in it. The young man on the bench learned something that afternoon that his years of study had not taught him. He learned it from the taste of simple tea, from the sound of birds in a garden, from an old man who had stopped hurrying and found, in the stillness, that everything he needed was already here. You cannot hurry the heart into contentment by filling it with more. Contentment arrives when we stop adding, when we let the teacup be just a teacup, when we let the moment be just a moment, when we trust, even for a breath, that just being here is enough. Let us rest here for a moment. Notice the stillness around you or within you. And when you are ready, we will go on. There is a map that none of us remembers being given. It was not handed to us in a ceremony or written out on parchment. It simply appeared somewhere in childhood, and we have been following it ever since. On this map, there is always a next place to go. There is always a destination ahead that is slightly more important than where we are now. The present moment on this map is never the arrival. Operating right now. Even in a moment of rest, there is often a quiet pull of forward motion in the mind. A sense that this pause has a boundary, that it is a small clearing and the road picks up again, just on the other side. We rarely experience what you might call an open-ended moment, a moment with no next thing, no deadline, no mental bookmark reminding us where we will go from here. Even our leisure is contained. We schedule our peace and then return to the road. Think of the last time you took a morning or an afternoon to do nothing. Even then, some part of the mind likely held the shape of the day around it. You knew when the free time would end. You knew what was coming after. And that knowledge, however faint, kept you from fully settling in. The moment was restful, perhaps, but it was not open. It was a capsule, a small parenthesis in a sentence that was already written. The Buddhist tradition has a word for this kind of experience. It is called samsara, and while it is often described as a great cosmic cycle, the Buddhist teachers also understood it as something much more immediate. Samsara is the felt sensation of going around and around, of reaching for the next thing before the current thing has been fully lived, of always spinning, always arriving somewhere new, and yet never quite landing. The Buddha described the untrained mind as a monkey swinging from branch to branch, unable to rest. One thought leads to the next, which leads to the next, and before we know it, we have traveled miles in our heads, while our body sits perfectly still in a chair. We have planned dinner, replayed a conversation from last week, worried about something 3 months from now, and none of it has been real. All of it has been the map, pulling us forward, away from the only place that is actually here. What makes this map so powerful is that we do not know we are following it. It feels like reality. It feels like this is simply how life works. You get things done. You move to the next thing. You get those things done. You move again. The idea that we might step off the map entirely, that we might stand still and let the road disappear, feels strange, almost irresponsible. And so we keep moving. We leave our bodies first, tensing against the future, pulling up into our heads where the planning happens. We leave emotionally next, exchanging the calm of this moment for a low-grade restlessness that hums along beneath everything we do. And then we leave mentally, which is where we spend most of our time, in plans, in worries, in rehearsals of conversations that may never happen, in reviews of conversations that already did. The Buddha noticed all of this thousands of years ago, simply by sitting still and watching his own mind. He saw how the mind jumps from thought to thought without pause, like a monkey swinging through the canopy, grabbing one branch and already reaching for the next. He saw that this movement is not random. It is driven by a deep restlessness, a belief that this moment is incomplete, that something better or safer or more satisfying is just ahead. And he saw that this belief, no matter how many branches the monkey grabs, is never satisfied. The next branch is always followed by another. There is no final branch. The reaching itself is the trap. There is a story about a woman who recognized this pattern in herself but could not escape it. She was a weaver in a busy market town, known for the speed and quality of her work. She wove from early morning until late at night, her hands never idle, her loom always clicking. When she was not weaving, she was preparing thread, or negotiating with merchants, or planning the next commission. She was respected. She was successful, and she was exhausted. One evening, she went to visit a Buddhist teacher who lived near the town. She sat across from him and said, "I cannot stop. I know I should rest. I know I am wearing myself thin. But when I try to stop, I feel something terrible. I feel like the world is continuing without me. Like everyone else is moving forward and I am falling behind." The teacher listened. Then he asked, "Left behind by whom?" She paused. "By everyone. By life. By the other weavers. By the merchants. By the town itself. And where are they all going?" She opened her mouth to answer and then stopped. She did not know. She had never thought about where they were all going. She only knew that they were moving and that she had to keep up. "Let me ask you something else," the teacher said. "When you finish a piece of cloth, is there a moment of satisfaction? A moment when you look at what you have made and feel complete?" "Sometimes," she said, "for a moment. But then I think of the next order, and the next, and the feeling passes. So the completion never lasts." "No. And you believe that the next piece will bring the satisfaction that this one did not?" She was quiet. She could see where he was going. "I suppose I do believe that," she said, "even though it never works that way." "This is the wheel," the teacher said. The Buddha called it the wheel of craving. We reach for the next thing because we believe it will complete us. When it does not, we reach again and again. Each time, the mind says, "Not this one, but the next one. The next one will be enough." And it never is, because the reaching itself is the problem. She looked down at her hands. They were rough and strong from years at the loom. "But the work is good," she said. "People need cloth." "The work is good," the teacher agreed. "I am not telling you to stop weaving. Your work brings beauty into the world. But I am asking you to notice the feeling that drives the weaving, the feeling that says you must not stop. That feeling is not about the cloth. It is about a fear that lives underneath the cloth. And until you turn toward that fear, even gently, even briefly, it will keep you running. She visited the teacher several more times that season. She did not stop weaving, but she began to notice the moments between the work. The moments when she set the shuttle down and simply sat. She began to let those moments last a little longer. And in those small pauses, she started to feel something she had not expected. She felt the ground beneath her. She felt her own breathing. And she found that the world, despite her deepest fears, was not leaving without her. It was right here, waiting, as it had always been. This story touches something that many of us recognize. The map we carry is not just a habit. It is driven by beliefs that run deep, beliefs we rarely examine because they feel so obviously true. One of the most common is the one the weaver described. If I stop, the world will move on without me. This is a fear of being left behind, of falling out of step with life itself. It keeps people working long after the work is done, checking long after there is nothing to check, moving long after the body has asked to rest. There is another belief that lives close beside it. It sounds like this: I have to be something in order to be accepted. I have to be interesting, or helpful, or impressive. I have to present a certain version of myself, or people will lose interest. This belief turns every conversation into a small performance, and every social gathering into work. If you have ever felt drained after spending time with people you care about, it may be worth asking how much of that time was simply being with them, and how much was spent trying to earn your place among them. There is a great difference between the two, and the body knows which one it has been doing. The Buddha saw this clearly. He taught that beneath most of our busyness lies one of two forces, craving or aversion. On the side of craving, there is the pull forward. Now is not enough. What I want is somewhere ahead. I need more. On the side of aversion, there is the pull away. Something is wrong. Something is about to go wrong. I need to protect myself. Both of them pull us out of the present. Both of them keep us following the map. And here is where the Buddhist teaching turns gentle. Because the tradition does not look at this restlessness and say, you are doing it wrong. Try harder. It looks at the restlessness and says, of course you are running. This is ancient. This is inherited. We carry within us the vigilance of every generation that came before us. The part of the mind that is always watching, always preparing for what might happen next, that part has been doing its job for a very long time. It earned its place in us, but the world has changed, and the old wiring has not caught up. The same alertness that once kept our ancestors safe now keeps us awake at night over things that have not happened yet and may never happen. Understanding this is not a cure, but it is the beginning of something. When we see the map for what it is, an old pattern rather than the truth, it begins to lose some of its power. We do not have to fight it. We do not have to tear it up. We just have to notice, with some kindness, that we are holding it. And what we hold, we can also gently set down. The Buddha once said, there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. This sounds, at first, like the kind of thing you might find carved into a stone in a garden. But it is pointing to something real and practical. The map in our minds tells us that happiness is ahead, that we will feel at peace when this project is done, when this problem is solved, when we arrive at some point in the future where everything is settled. The Buddha is saying that point does not exist. There is no place on the map where the map ends and happiness begins. The map will always generate another destination. That is what maps do. Happiness, if it is anywhere, is in the willingness to fold the map up and set it down. To stand where we are and look around. To feel the ground beneath us and the air around us and say, this is where I am, and this is enough. The weaver discovered this in the pauses between her work. The Buddha discovered it under a tree on the night of his awakening, when he finally stopped seeking and simply sat. Each of them, in their own way, found the same thing. That the relentless forward movement of the mind is not the truth about life. It is a habit, and like all habits, it can be seen, and what is seen begins to change. There is a beautiful image in the Zen tradition. A master once compared the mind to a glass of muddy water. If you hold it in your hands and keep stirring, the water stays cloudy. But if you set it down and leave it alone, the mud slowly settles to the bottom and the water clears on its own. You do not have to do anything to make it clear. You just have to stop stirring. This is what setting down the map feels like. It is not an achievement. It is a release. The mind, left alone, knows how to settle. The heart, left alone, knows how to open. We do not have to direct them. We do not have to steer ourselves toward peace. We just have to stop stirring long enough to let the water clear. You cannot hurry this. The heart that has been following the map for years will not set it down in a single moment. But every moment of recognition helps. Every time we notice ourselves reaching for the next branch, the next worry, the next destination, and instead choose to stay here, just for a breath, something loosens. The map does not disappear, but it becomes lighter, and we begin to remember that we are the ones carrying it, and that we can, whenever we are ready, put it down. Let us pause here. Feel yourself right where you are. There is nowhere to go and nothing to prepare for. When you are ready, we will continue. The Buddhist tradition teaches that everything changes. This is one of the most basic observations in all of Buddhism, one of what the teachers call the 3 marks of existence. Nothing stays the same. The seasons turn, the body ages, the people we love grow and change and, one day, are no longer beside us. We know this. Somewhere in our minds, we know it completely. And yet most of us live as if we have forgotten. We rush through our days, as if there will always be more of them. We put off the things that matter, as if the chance to do them will always come around again. We treat the present moment like a rough draft, something to get through on the way to a final version that never quite arrives. The Buddhist teachers did not talk about impermanence to frighten anyone. They talked about it because they noticed something remarkable. When a person truly grasps that this life is limited, something unexpected happens. The urgency to rush dissolves. Attention sharpens. The ordinary becomes luminous. The things we thought were small, the warmth of a meal, the sound of rain, the particular color of the sky on a given afternoon, suddenly reveal themselves as the very things we have been searching for all along. There is a well-known story in the Zen tradition. A master was once asked to write the highest wisdom in a single word. He picked up his brush and wrote, "Attention." His students were disappointed. They wanted something grander, something more complex. They asked him to elaborate. He picked up his brush again and wrote, "Attention, attention, attention." When they pressed him further, he said simply, "Attention means attention." That was the whole teaching, and it is the teaching at the heart of what follows. There is a story about a woman who lived in a small village. She was the kind of person who was always in motion. She helped run the village kitchen. She tended gardens for neighbors who were too old to manage their own. She organized, she planned, she kept things moving. She was always needed somewhere, and she took pride in that. But it also meant she was always slightly behind, always reaching for the next task before she had finished the one in her hands. One spring, a healer passed through the village. The woman had not been feeling well for some time. A tiredness that sleep did not touch. A heaviness that came and went. She visited the healer, expecting herbs, expecting advice about rest. The healer was kind and unhurried. She spent a long time with the woman, listening, observing, asking careful questions. And when she was finished, she spoke gently. She told the woman that her body was growing tired in a way that rest could not mend. That this tiredness would deepen as the months passed. That by the time the leaves turned and fell, her body would be ready to rest for good. She had this one season, and she should spend it well. The woman walked home along the path she had walked 100 times. The trees were the same. The river was the same. The light through the branches was the same. And yet something in her had shifted so completely that it felt as if the village had rearranged itself around her while she was away. She expected to feel afraid. She expected to weep. What came instead was something she had no name for. A kind of settling, as if a weight she had not known she was carrying had been gently lifted from her shoulders and set aside. For years, she had been leaning into the future, planning and worrying and preparing. Now the future had drawn close, and in its closeness, it had lost its power over her. There was only this afternoon, this path, this light. In the days that followed, she noticed something she had not expected. She was no longer in a hurry. The feeling that had followed her for years, that constant pull forward, the sense that she was behind and needed to move faster, it was gone. In its place was something vast and simple. She had one season, and because she could not afford to waste it rushing, she stopped. She stopped planning tomorrow while doing today's work. She stopped glancing ahead to the next task before finishing the one in her hands. When she cooked, she cooked. When she walked, she walked. When she sat, she sat. And in each of these ordinary acts, she found a richness she had been walking past for years. "I have no time to rush," she said to herself one morning. And the phrase settled into her like a refrain, appearing again and again throughout the day. She said it while preparing food. She said it while walking to the well. She said it while sitting in the garden, watching the light move through the leaves. It became, without her intending it, a kind of quiet practice. Each time the old habit of hurrying arose, each time she felt that familiar pull toward the next task, the words would return, "I have no time to rush," and the hurrying would dissolve, and she would return to whatever was right in front of her. She noticed that food tasted different when she prepared it slowly. She could smell the herbs as she chopped them. She could feel the texture of the dough in her hands. She found herself noticing things in the kitchen she had walked past 1,000 times. A crack in the wall where the light came through, a particular shade of brown in the wooden table, the sound the kettle made just before the water boiled. She noticed that walking was different too. The path to the well, which had always been something to get through as quickly as possible, became a place of small discoveries. The way the dust moved in the late afternoon, the sound the water made as she drew it up, the cool weight of the bucket in her hands. Each of these things had been there before, every day of her life, and she had walked right past them. And she noticed, most of all, that the people around her were different. Not that they had changed. Her neighbors were the same people they had always been. But she was seeing them now, really seeing them, in a way that busyness had made impossible. She noticed the way the old man down the road smiled when he talked about his late wife. She noticed how the children in the village played with complete abandon, tumbling over each other, laughing at nothing. She noticed the patience with which the potter across the lane shaped his clay, his hands moving slowly, his attention undivided. The world was full of these quiet wonders. They had been there all along. She had just been moving too fast to see them. Her sister came to visit one afternoon and found her sitting in the doorway, watching the rain. "How are you?" her sister asked, in the careful way people speak when they are worried. "I am here," the woman said. "That is how I am." Her sister sat down beside her. For a while, they just watched the rain together, how it darkened the path and made the garden smell of earth. "Is there anything you need?" her sister asked. "No." She paused. "I have been thinking about something. For years, I felt like I never had enough time. I was always rushing, always behind. And now, when I have less time than ever, I feel like I have more of it. Is that strange?" Her sister did not answer right away. "I think it is beautiful," she said quietly. "And I think it is something I should learn from you while I can." "It is simple," the woman said. "I just stopped leaving. I stopped leaving this moment to go to the next one. That is all. And when I stopped leaving, I found that everything I needed was already here. It was always here. I was just too busy to notice." "How do you do it?" her sister asked. "How do you stop yourself from worrying about what comes next?" The woman thought about this. "I do not always succeed," she said. "Sometimes the old feeling comes back, the pull forward, the feeling that I should be doing more. But when it comes, I say to myself, I have no time to rush. And then I look at whatever is in front of me, really look at it, and the feeling passes. And you are not afraid?" "Sometimes, but less than you would think. The fear lives in the future, and I am trying very hard to stay in today." They sat together. The rain continued. A cat from one of the neighboring houses wandered into the doorway, shook the water from its fur, and curled up between them as if it had been invited. The woman reached down and stroked its back, and the three of them sat there, listening to the rain, and the moment was so full and quiet and complete that she could not have called it anything but peace. She spent the rest of that season the same way. She cooked slowly, tasting the food as she prepared it. She walked slowly, noticing the ground beneath her feet. She sat in the garden and watched the bees move from flower to flower. She listened to people when they spoke, fully, without planning her reply. And people seemed to sense this. They lingered longer in her company. They said things they had been carrying for a long time. It was as if her attention had opened a space that had not been there before, and others stepped into it gratefully. She did not do anything extraordinary that season. She did ordinary things with extraordinary attention. And in doing so, she found something that years of rushing had kept hidden from her. That this life, this ordinary life, was already full. It had always been full. She had simply been moving too fast to notice. The Buddhist teaching on impermanence is often misunderstood. People hear the word and think it is a teaching about loss, about everything being taken away. But the great Buddhist teachers meant something different. They meant that impermanence is the very thing that makes each moment precious. If the cherry blossom lasted forever, we would stop seeing it. It is because it falls that we look up. It is because this moment will pass that it asks for our attention. The Zen tradition holds this teaching very close. In many Zen monasteries, students are asked to meditate on impermanence every day. This is not done to create sadness. It is done to sharpen attention. When you know, in your body, and not just in your mind, that this hour will not come again, you begin to treat it differently. You stop skimming. You stop multitasking. You stop dividing your attention between what is here and what might be coming. The woman in the story did not discover something new. She discovered what had always been there. The sound of rain on the roof. The taste of food prepared without rushing. The feel of warm clay from the potter's wheel. These had been available to her every day of her life. Impermanence did not give them to her. It cleared her eyes so she could finally see them. This is what the Buddhist teachers mean when they say that awareness of impermanence is a gateway. It is not a gateway to despair. It is a gateway to presence. When we stop taking our moments for granted, each one becomes vivid. Each one arrives with its full weight. And we find, to our surprise, that the ordinary life we have been rushing through contains everything we were looking for. There is a line from the poet Rilke, passed through many hands and many traditions over the years. Paraphrased gently, it says something like this: all this hurrying will soon be over. Only when we slow down, only when we linger, do we touch what is holy. Only when we are willing to be fully here, without rushing toward the next moment, do we find what we have been looking for. You cannot hurry the heart into presence. The woman found this through the most difficult of circumstances, but we do not have to wait for difficult circumstances to learn what she learned. Our time has always been short. Every one of us is living through a season, even if we do not know its name. The question is not how much time we have. The question is how much of it we are here for. There is a saying, often shared in Buddhist circles: the trouble is, you think you have time. This is not a grim warning. It is a gentle invitation. An invitation to pay attention, to stop rushing, to let this morning, this afternoon, this ordinary moment be enough. Because it is enough. It has always been enough. We just forgot, somewhere along the way, to look. The woman's refrain still echoes. I have no time to rush. It is worth carrying, even here, even now, as we move through this evening together. There is nowhere we need to hurry to. This breath, this moment, is the whole of it. Let us be still here for a moment. Just breathing. Just here, and whenever you are ready, we will go on together. There is a feeling that most of us know but rarely talk about. It has no clear cause. It is not connected to any particular worry or any specific fear. It is more like a low tone playing in the background of our lives, so constant that we barely notice it until the moment we try to be still. Then we hear it. It sounds like this: something is not quite right. Something needs attention. Something, somewhere, is about to go wrong. We cannot say what it is. If we were asked to name the source, we might not be able to. But the feeling is there, humming along beneath our thoughts and our plans, coloring everything with a faint shade of unease. We feel it when we wake in the early hours and the mind starts turning before our eyes have fully opened. We feel it in the quiet moments between tasks, when nothing is wrong but something does not feel settled. We feel it even in moments that should be restful, sitting with a friend, watching the evening come in, lying in bed with nowhere to be. The body is at rest, but something inside is still scanning, still checking, still on alert. The Buddhist tradition recognized this feeling thousands of years ago. The Buddha saw it clearly and named it as one of the central facts of human life. The word is often translated as suffering, but that is too strong for what we are describing here. A gentler translation is unsatisfactoriness, the pervasive sense that something is off, that this moment is not quite complete, that we should be doing something about something, even if we cannot say what. This is not a mood. It is not depression or anxiety, though it can feed both. It is something subtler and more ancient than that. It is a kind of background hum that runs through the human experience, and understanding where it comes from is one of the most compassionate things we can do for ourselves. Imagine a man who has decided to sit quietly for a while. He has heard that stillness is good for the mind. He finds a comfortable place, closes his eyes, and settles in. For a moment, everything is calm, and then the hum begins. First, a thought about something he forgot to do. Then a thought about tomorrow. Then a review of a conversation from earlier in the day, examining it from a new angle. Then a plan for dinner. Then a worry about something he cannot control. Then a judgment about the fact that he is thinking so much when he is supposed to be sitting quietly. Each thought arrives uninvited, and each one brings a companion. They multiply. They overlap. They create the impression of urgency where no urgency exists. He opens his eyes. He feels frustrated. He feels like he has failed at something that should be simple. If he is patient, and if he has a teacher he trusts, he might bring this frustration to them. I tried to sit quietly, he might say, and my mind would not cooperate. Every time I tried to be still, it got louder. I think something might be wrong with me. And a good teacher, grounded in the Buddhist tradition, would say something like this: nothing is wrong with you. Your mind is doing exactly what minds do. It has been doing this for a very long time, long before you were born. But why does it do this? The man might ask. Why does the mind not want to be still? Because for most of human history, the teacher would say, being still could get you killed. Your mind learned, over thousands of generations, that silence is suspicious, that stillness is dangerous, that the safest thing to do is to keep thinking. In its old way, to keep you alive. This is where the teaching opens into something unexpected. Because the restlessness we feel when we try to sit still, the hum beneath our thoughts, is not a personal failing. It is an inheritance. And to understand it, we need to go back a very long way. For most of human history, stillness was dangerous. Our ancestors lived in a world where pausing for too long could mean being caught by a predator, or missing a shift in the weather, or losing track of a threat moving through the tall grass. The ones who survived were the ones who stayed alert. The ones who kept scanning, kept listening, kept their attention moving across their surroundings, even when everything seemed calm. The cautious ones, the watchful ones, the ones who assumed the worst, those were the ones who lived long enough to have children, and their children inherited that caution. This is written into us now. Our bodies remember a world we have never lived in. The part of the mind that is always generating the next worry, always checking the corners, always producing a low-grade sense that something needs attention. That part has been doing its work faithfully for 100,000 years. It does not know about safe rooms and locked doors. It does not know about peaceful evenings and warm blankets. It only knows one thing: stay alert. This is why, when we lie down at night, the mind often starts producing thoughts we did not ask for. Concerns about tomorrow, replays of the day, plans and worries that seem to appear from nowhere. The mind is filling the silence the way our ancestors' minds filled the darkness, with watchfulness, with readiness, with the persistent feeling that we should be paying attention to something, even if we cannot name what it is. We even wake several times each night without remembering it. Our bodies rise briefly to the surface of sleep, check that everything is safe, that no sound or movement requires a response, and then settle back down. We have been doing this for longer than we have been building houses. It is older than language. It is older than fire. And during the day, when we have no pressing task, the mind does something similar. Rather than rest, it generates. It produces thoughts about the future and the past, rehearsals and reviews, just to keep us oriented in our story of who we are and what might be coming. The Buddhist teachers noticed this long before modern science confirmed it. The mind, left without a task, does not rest. It narrates. It plans. It worries. This is its default state. And this is the hum. This is the background tone of our existence. Something might go wrong. Stay alert. Keep watching. Do not let your guard down. The world has changed. We sleep in safe rooms. We have shelter and warmth and food. But the old wiring does not know this. It fires the same signals it always has. The body tenses against a future that may hold nothing to fear. The mind races through scenarios it will never need to act on. The heart holds a subtle tightness, a readiness for trouble, even on the calmest of afternoons. And because we do not understand where this tightness comes from, we assume it means something. We assume that if we feel uneasy, there must be a reason. We look for the reason. We scan our relationships, our work, our plans, searching for the source of the unease. And often, we find something, because if you look hard enough for a problem, the mind will always provide one. But the problem was not the cause of the feeling. The feeling was already there, looking for a place to land. There is something important in understanding this, and it is the place where the Buddhist teaching becomes truly kind. Because if the hum is not personal, if it is not a sign that something is wrong with us, then we do not have to fight it. We do not have to be frustrated with ourselves for being restless. We do not have to treat our busy minds as enemies that need to be conquered. We can look at the hum the way we might look at a very old friend who always worries, with understanding, with patience, with a kind of tender humor. The Buddha taught that the first step in working with suffering is simply to see it clearly. He did not say to eliminate it. He did not say to wrestle it into submission. He said to see it, to know it for what it is. And when we see the hum clearly, when we recognize that it is ancient and inherited and shared by every human being who has ever lived, something changes. The hum does not disappear, but our relationship to it softens. We stop taking it personally. We stop believing that it means something is wrong with this moment, and we start seeing it for what it is, the echo of a very old caution, still reverberating in us long after the danger has passed. This is the quiet power of the Buddhist path. It does not promise to remove difficulty. It offers something more honest and more lasting, the ability to meet difficulty with clear eyes and an open heart. When we stop fighting the hum and simply let it be there, it loses its grip on us. It becomes part of the weather of being alive, and we can rest even in the middle of it. A Zen teacher once compared this to sitting in a room with a noisy street outside. At first, the noise is distracting. We want it to stop. We tense against it. We feel frustrated. But if we sit long enough, something shifts. The noise is still there, but it is no longer a problem. We are no longer fighting it. We are simply here, in a room, with noise, and that is fine. Nothing needed to change except our relationship to it. The man who sat down to meditate and found his mind racing, he is not doing it wrong. He is meeting something ancient. And if he can meet it with gentleness instead of frustration, if he can say to his busy mind, I see you, I understand you, you have been keeping watch for a very long time, and I thank you for it, but right now, we are safe. Then something begins to ease. The thoughts may not stop, but the war with them stops. And the peace that lives beneath the thinking, the peace that was always there, has room to surface. This is what happens with the hum. We do not have to make it go away. We just have to stop being surprised by it, to meet it when it arises with something closer to kindness than combat. The Buddha's path begins with this kind of seeing. He called it clear comprehension, the ability to know what is happening while it is happening, without adding a story on top of it. When we feel the hum and recognize it for what it is, we are practicing this. We are stepping out of the old pattern, even if just for a moment, and meeting our own experience with something warmer than frustration. This kind of seeing is not dramatic. It does not happen in a blinding flash. It happens in small, ordinary moments. A moment of tension in the shoulders, noticed and allowed to soften. A rush of worry, recognized and held lightly. A night of restless thoughts, met with understanding rather than irritation. Each of these small moments is a step toward a different relationship with ourselves, one built not on control but on kindness. You cannot hurry the heart into this kind of gentleness. It comes slowly, through many such moments, and it asks nothing extraordinary of us. It asks only that the next time we feel the hum, the next time the old apprehension stirs in us for no clear reason, we do not immediately try to fix it or explain it or push it away. Instead, we let it be there. We acknowledge it. We recognize it as something very old, something shared, something that has been humming along in human beings since the very beginning. The Buddhist tradition calls what lives beneath the hum our original nature, It is the part of us that is already at peace, already complete, already home. The Zen masters described it as a clear sky behind the clouds. The clouds move. They change. They sometimes darken the whole sky. But behind them, the sky is always there, always open, always blue. The hum is like the weather. Our nature is like the sky. The hum will continue. The mind will keep doing its old work. The body will keep its ancient watch. But when we know the hum for what it is, we are no longer lost in it. We are simply here, awake, with an old companion playing its familiar tune in the background. And we discover, quietly, that we can rest even so. That peace does not require silence. It only requires understanding. The heart cannot be hurried past the hum, but it can learn, gently and over time, to hear right through it. Let us pause here. Notice if there is any restlessness in you right now, any hum in the background, and see if you can let it be there without needing it to change. Just notice it. Just let it be. And when you are ready, we will continue together. How quickly do we react? If we watch ourselves carefully, the answer is almost immediately. Something happens, and before we have taken a full breath, we are already responding. Someone speaks, and we are already forming our reply before they have finished their sentence. A feeling arises, and we are already acting on it. A thought appears, and we are already following it down the corridor, 3 turns deep, before we realize we have left the room. The space between what happens and what we do about it is so small that most of the time we do not even know it exists. We fall through it without noticing. The event and the reaction feel like one thing, a single motion, as if the response were built into the stimulus. We snap at someone and say we could not help it. We reach for comfort and say the urge was too strong. We spiral into worry and say the thoughts just came. In each case, what we are really saying is, I could not find the gap. There was no space between the impulse and the action. It all happened too fast. But the Buddhist tradition teaches that this is an illusion. A powerful one, but an illusion nonetheless. The event and the reaction are 2 separate things. And between them, however brief, there is a gap, a space, a pause. And in that pause, if we can learn to find it, lives something extraordinary. Our freedom. A wise teacher once said it this way: between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space is our power and our freedom. The entire Buddhist path, in some sense, is an invitation to widen that space, to find the pause between what arises and what we do next, to stop falling through the gap and instead learn to stand in it, awake and free. This is not an abstract idea. It is something the Buddha himself discovered on a single night, sitting beneath a tree, in one of the most important moments in the history of human understanding. On the night of his awakening, the Buddha sat beneath a tree. He had been searching for a long time. He had studied with the finest teachers of his age. He had practiced severe disciplines, pushing his body to the edge of endurance, starving himself, denying himself sleep, trying to force his way to understanding through sheer effort. None of it had worked. He had reached the end of striving. And so he sat down. He chose a tree at the edge of a forest, a broad tree with deep roots and wide branches. He sat on the ground beneath it, on a cushion of grass, and he made a simple vow, I will not move from this spot until I have found what I am looking for. This is the part of the story that is easy to misunderstand. It sounds like another act of willpower, one more determined push. But it was the opposite. It was a surrender. He had tried everything that effort could give him, and he was finished with effort. He had pushed his body to its limits, and it had not brought him clarity. He had studied with the greatest teachers, and their answers had not satisfied him. He had disciplined his mind with fierce concentration, and still the peace he sought remained just out of reach. Each method had promised to take him somewhere, and each one had left him still searching. So he stopped. He was not going to force anything. He was going to sit and be still and see what happened when he stopped trying. The night deepened. The forest sounds grew louder around him, insects calling to each other across the darkness. The rustle of leaves in a breeze he could feel on his skin. Somewhere nearby, the sound of water moving over stones. The air cooled. The stars brightened overhead, visible through the canopy. And as he sat, things began to arise in his mind. This is the part of the story that is sometimes told as a dramatic battle, a confrontation with a great tempter. But it may be simpler and more useful to understand it as something any of us might recognize. Impulses arose. Thoughts arose. Urges arose. The urge to stand up and move. The urge to plan his next step. The urge to review the past, to analyze what had gone wrong, to rehearse what he might do differently. The pull of desire. Wouldn't it be better to be somewhere else, doing something else, living some other kind of life? The pull of doubt. What if this is pointless? What if there is nothing to find? What if I am wasting my time? Then subtler things. Memories of people he had known, places he had been, conversations he might have had differently. The mind offered him entire lives he could have lived, unspooling like threads in the dark, each one with its own pull, its own promise. Come this way. Follow this thought. This is more interesting than sitting here. And beneath all of it, that familiar background unease. The ancient whisper that said, something is wrong. You should be doing something about it. You should not be sitting still in the dark. Each of these arose. And each time, the Buddha did something very simple. He did not follow it. He did not fight it either. He simply noticed it, let it be there, and did not move. He stayed in the space between the impulse and the action. He sat in the gap. This is the remarkable thing. He did not push the impulses away. He did not argue with them, or analyze them, or try to understand where they came from. He just let them rise, like sounds in the forest, and he let them pass. One after another, through the long hours of the night, desire arose. He stayed. Restlessness arose. He stayed. Fear arose. He stayed. Longing arose. He stayed. Each time, the impulse came, offered itself, and then dissolved when it was not acted on. Like a wave that reaches the shore and, meeting no resistance, simply returns to the sea. And as the night went on, the spaces between the impulses grew wider. The gap that had seemed so narrow at the beginning of the evening slowly opened, like a door swinging wide. The thoughts came less frequently. The urges lost their urgency. And in the growing space between them, something else became apparent. A stillness that had been there all along, beneath the noise, waiting to be noticed. Not something he had created, something he had uncovered by choosing, again and again, not to leave. By morning, the story says, he was free. Not free from thoughts, not free from feelings, not free from the world. Free in the sense that he could see clearly. He could see the impulse arise, and he could see the space before the response, and he knew from the long night's experience that he did not have to fall through that space anymore. He could stand in it. He could rest there. And from that resting place, whatever he chose to do next would come from clarity rather than from habit. This is not a story about an extraordinary person doing something we cannot do. This is a story about a human being discovering something that is available to all of us. The space between stimulus and response. The pause before the reaction. It is there right now, in this moment, between whatever is arising in your experience and whatever you might do about it. What the Buddha found that night was not a special power. It was a recognition. He recognized that the thoughts and impulses that had been driving him his entire life, the same ones that drive all of us, were not commands. They were invitations. And invitations can be declined. We can feel the pull of anger without speaking in anger. We can feel the pull of worry without following the worry to its conclusion. We can feel the urge to escape this moment and choose, gently, to stay. This is not about suppression. The Buddha was very clear about this. He did not teach people to push their feelings down or to pretend they did not exist. He taught them to see their feelings clearly, to hold them in awareness without being controlled by them. There is a great difference between a feeling that is denied and a feeling that is seen. The denied feeling goes underground and returns stronger. The seen feeling rises, is acknowledged, and passes. Like a cloud moving across an open sky. The Buddhist tradition has built an entire practice around learning to find this space. In meditation, we sit and we watch the mind. Thoughts arise, and instead of following them, we notice them and let them go. Feelings arise, and instead of reacting, we hold them gently and wait. Each time we do this, we are strengthening our ability to stand in the gap. Each time we notice an impulse without acting on it, the space widens just a little. There is a beautiful image that some Buddhist teachers use. They describe awareness as a wheel. The rim of the wheel is everything that happens: thoughts, feelings, sounds, sensations, the constant spinning stream of experience. The hub of the wheel is the still center, the place of presence from which everything is observed. Most of the time, we live on the rim. We are caught in the spinning, pulled from one thought to the next, one reaction to the next, one urgency to the next. We forget that the hub exists. The practice is simply to return to the hub, again and again. Not to stop the wheel from turning, because it will always turn, but to find the still point at its center and rest there. From the hub, we can see the rim clearly. We can see our thoughts and feelings and impulses spinning past without being carried away by them. We can choose which ones to follow and which ones to let go. This is the freedom the Buddha found beneath the tree. The freedom to watch without being swept away. And this is available anywhere. In a conversation that is growing tense. In the moment before we reach for something we know we do not need. In the breath between receiving difficult news and deciding how to respond. Every moment of our lives contains this gap. We simply have to slow down enough to notice it. There is a story about a great leader and teacher who was told by his companions that his schedule was too full. There was too much to do, too many people who needed him, too many problems that demanded his attention. There was no room in his day for stillness. Then I must take twice as much time for prayer and contemplation, he said. His companions thought this was foolish. How could he afford to do less when there was already too much? But he understood something that the rushing mind resists. We do not pause because we have time. We pause because pausing is what makes our time worthwhile. Everything he did, every word he spoke, every decision he made, came from a deeper place when he approached it from stillness rather than from hurry. The pause did not slow his work down. It made his work wiser. You cannot hurry the heart through the space between stimulus and response. That space is where freedom lives. And the heart knows this, even when the mind is racing. Every time we pause, even for one breath, we are sitting beneath the tree. We are choosing not to follow the impulse. We are finding, in the space between, a steadiness and a clarity that no amount of rushing can provide. The pause changes everything, not because it stops the world, but because it changes us. From the pause, we speak differently. We choose differently. We respond to the people in our lives with more patience and more warmth. The same situation that might have triggered a sharp reply becomes, with one breath of space, an opportunity to be kind. The same worry that might have spiraled into an hour of restless thinking becomes, with one moment of recognition, just a thought, just a sound in the forest, just a wave returning to the sea. The Buddha sat through one long night and discovered the space that had always been there. We do not need an entire night. We need one breath, one moment of choosing to stay rather than react, one small pause in which we remember that we are not our impulses, and that between what happens and what we do, there is room for something wiser and kinder to emerge. The pause is always available. It does not require preparation or special circumstances. It lives in every moment, at the center of the turning wheel, quiet and steady, waiting for us to come home to it. Let us rest in that space now. Just this breath, just this moment. Nothing to react to, nothing to do. And whenever you are ready, we will go on. There is a poem by the Sufi mystic Hafiz, and while he comes from a different tradition than the one we have been exploring tonight, his words belong here. Paraphrased gently, the poem says something like this: the saint knows that the whole spiritual path is a kind of game, and that something wonderful has already happened. And so the saint keeps tripping over joy and bursting into laughter and saying, "I surrender." But most of us, the poet says, still think we have 1,000 serious moves to make. 1,000 serious moves. That is a good description of how many of us approach our lives. We are serious about our work. We are serious about our relationships. We are serious about our growth and our plans and our futures. We take ourselves seriously, and we take the game seriously, and we move through our days with the focused determination of someone who believes that one wrong step will cost them everything. The Buddhist tradition has something to say about this. It says, what if the game is lighter than you think? What if the love you are working so hard to earn is already here? What if the connection you are striving toward is something that appears on its own the moment you stop striving? There is a well-known saying that angels fly because they take themselves lightly. The Zen tradition has its own version of this. Zen masters are famous for laughing at unexpected moments, for giving absurd answers to serious questions, for responding to deep philosophical inquiries with a clap or a shout, or a simple instruction to go wash the dishes. This is not because they are unserious. It is because they have seen through the heaviness. They have discovered that the thing we are all searching for is not hidden behind some final, serious move. It is right here, in the middle of the game, waiting for us to lighten up enough to notice. What does this have to do with love? Everything. Consider what happens when we are in a hurry. We pass through conversations without landing in them. We sit beside the people we care about while our minds are somewhere else entirely. We say I love you on our way out the door, already reaching for our bag, already thinking about the road ahead. The words are true. The feeling is real. But the person receiving them can sense the difference between love that is present and love that is passing through on its way to somewhere else. The Buddhist teacher Thomas Merton once wrote that our habitual rushing is a form of violence. He did not mean physical violence. He meant that speed violates something deep in us and in our relationships. It violates the natural rhythm of connection, which is slow. It takes time to truly see another person. It takes stillness to feel what they are feeling. It takes a kind of unhurried attention that the busy mind finds very difficult to offer. We know this from experience, even if we have never put it into words. We know the difference between a conversation where someone is fully with us and a conversation where they are glancing at the clock. We know the difference between being listened to and being waited out. We know the difference between sitting with someone who has nowhere else to be and sitting with someone who is already halfway to the next appointment. These differences are not subtle. They are the difference between feeling loved and feeling managed. And yet, most of the time, we are the ones who are rushing. We are the ones glancing at the clock, the ones with somewhere else to be. We love the people in our lives, and we are often too busy to show them in a way they can feel. There is a story about two old friends who had not seen each other in many years. They had studied together at a monastery when they were young and had gone their separate ways, one to teach in the cities, the other to live quietly in the mountains. After a long time apart, the one from the city made the journey to visit his old friend. He arrived tired and buzzing with the energy of travel. His mind was still full of the life he had temporarily left behind. Students who needed him, lessons he was preparing, a disagreement with a colleague that he was turning over and over in his thoughts. Even as he walked the final stretch of mountain path, his mind was composing replies to arguments that were happening somewhere far away. His friend welcomed him with tea and a warm smile and very few words. They sat together on a porch overlooking a valley. The mountains were blue in the distance, and the air smelled of pine. The mountain friend poured tea slowly and carefully. He did not ask about the journey, or about the city, or about any of the things the traveler expected to discuss. He simply sat there, present, quiet, at ease. The traveler found this uncomfortable at first. He was used to filling silences. He was used to conversations that moved with purpose, that covered ground, that arrived somewhere useful. Silence, in his life, usually meant something had gone wrong. He started talking about his work, his students, the disagreement with his colleague. He described it in detail, presenting his side, building his case, growing animated as he spoke. His friend listened, nodding occasionally, sipping his tea, but did not seem to be in any hurry to offer an opinion. After a while, the traveler ran out of words. The things he had been carrying, the plans and complaints and analyses, they had all been spoken, shift in himself, as if a tight knot behind his ribs had quietly loosened. "How are you?" he asked. And this time, he meant it. He was not asking to be polite. He was not asking while composing his next sentence. He was asking because he genuinely wanted to know, and he had finally slowed down enough to receive the answer. His friend smiled. "I am well," he said. "And now, so are you." They spent the rest of the afternoon on that porch, talking and listening in a way they had not done since they were young men with nothing to prove. The traveler noticed that the conversation had a different quality than the ones he was used to. There was no performance in it. Neither of them was trying to be impressive or interesting or helpful. They were just two people, being with each other, fully, without hurry. And in that simplicity, the traveler felt a warmth he had not felt in a long time. A sense of being seen, of being, for once, enough just as he was. He noticed something else too. When his friend spoke, the traveler found himself actually listening, not planning his response, not comparing what he heard to his own experience, not waiting for a gap so he could steer the conversation somewhere useful. Just listening. And in that listening, his friend's words seemed to land differently. They carried more weight. They reached deeper. It was as if the simple act of paying attention had opened a door that his usual busy mind kept firmly shut. On the walk back down the mountain the next morning, the traveler thought about this. He thought about how many conversations he had in a given week and how few of them felt like the one on the porch. Most of his conversations were transactions, exchanges of information, negotiations of plans, quick check-ins conducted while both people were already moving on to the next thing. They were efficient. They were productive. And they were almost entirely empty of the warmth he had felt on that porch. He wondered how much love he had been walking past, simply because he had never slowed down enough to receive it. This is what happens when we slow down enough to let love in. Because love, the Buddhist tradition teaches, is not something we manufacture. It is not something we earn or achieve through effort. Love is what the heart does when it is no longer rushed. It is what remains when we stop performing, stop proving, stop trying to be something other than what we are. The Buddha spoke of a quality called metta, which is often translated as loving kindness. Metta is not the dramatic, passionate love of stories and songs. It is something quieter and more durable. It is the simple wish for another person's happiness, the willingness to see them clearly, without judgment, and to care about what we see. And it begins, always, with slowing down. We cannot feel metta in a hurry. We cannot wish someone well while we are racing past them. The heart has to settle first. It has to arrive in the moment, fully, before it can open to another person. This is why the practice of metta in the Buddhist tradition begins with stillness. We sit, we breathe, we let the mind calm, and then, from that calm, we extend a simple wish. May you be happy, may you be at peace. It is not forced. It is not performed. It is a natural movement of the heart that happens when we give it room, as naturally as water flows downhill when nothing is blocking it. The Buddha said that metta is the most powerful force in the world, and it does not require effort to produce. It requires only the removal of what is blocking it. The rushing, the planning, the performing, the defending, all of these are walls we have built around the heart, usually without meaning to. When we slow down, when we stop building, the walls thin, and what comes through is not something we have to create. It is something that was always there. You cannot hurry the heart into love. Love is not a task to be completed or a goal to be reached. It is more like a flower that opens when the conditions are right, when there is warmth and light and enough stillness for the opening to happen on its own. Our job is not to force the opening. Our job is to create the conditions, to slow down, to pay attention, to stop believing that we have 1,000 serious moves to make, and instead to trust that the most important move is the simplest one, to be here, fully, with whoever is in front of us. The traveler on the porch discovered this in an afternoon. After years of performing and producing and rushing through conversations on his way to somewhere else, he sat still long enough for the knot to loosen and the heart to open. And what he found there was not something new. It was something very old, a connection that had been waiting patiently all that time for him to arrive. The Zen tradition sometimes speaks of the heart wide as the world. It is a phrase that points to something most of us have felt, if only in glimpses. Those moments when the boundary between ourselves and another person becomes thin. When we feel, deeply and without effort, that we belong to each other. That the love we have been searching for is not something rare or distant, but something woven into the fabric of being alive. These moments come when we least expect them. They come in quiet conversations that go deeper than we planned. They come in shared silences that feel more intimate than words. They come when someone looks at us and we can tell, without anything being said, that they see us clearly and that what they see is enough. These moments are not produced by effort. They cannot be scheduled or engineered. They happen when we let go of our seriousness long enough to be surprised. When we stop managing and start receiving. When we trust that the heart, given room, knows exactly what to do. The poet Hafiz was right. We do think we have 1,000 serious moves to make, and the moves feel very real, very urgent, very important. But the saints and the sages and the quiet old friends on mountain porches have seen through the game. They have discovered that the most important move was always the simplest: to stop, to look, to listen, to let the heart do what it was made to do. You cannot hurry the heart into this kind of openness, but you can stop rushing long enough to let it happen. And when it does, it is the simplest and most ordinary thing in the world. Two people sitting together, a cup of tea held carefully, a question asked with genuine interest, and a warmth that fills the space between them, not because either of them created it, but because they finally stopped doing everything that was keeping it out. Let us sit with this warmth for a moment. Feel it wherever it is. And when you are ready, we will continue together one last time. There is a question that lives at the heart of the Zen tradition. It has been asked in monasteries and on mountaintops and in quiet rooms for over 1,000 years. It is not a riddle and it is not a trick. It is the simplest question a person can ask, and yet it is the one we most often forget to consider. The question is this: who is aware right now? Not what are you thinking, not what are you feeling, not what happened today or what might happen tomorrow. But right now, in this moment, who is the one who is aware of all of it? Who is hearing these words? Who is feeling the weight of the body? Who is noticing the breath, the sounds in the room, the quality of this particular moment? We spend our whole lives paying attention to the contents of our experience, the thoughts, the feelings, the plans, the worries, the joys. We catalog them. We analyze them. We chase some and flee from others. We build entire identities around them. But we rarely turn around and look at the one who is paying attention. We are so absorbed in what we are seeing that we forget to ask who is seeing. It is a strange kind of forgetting. Imagine spending your entire life watching a film, so captivated by the story on the screen that you forget you are sitting in a seat, in a room, with the light of the projector behind you. The film is vivid and compelling, and it has been playing for as long as you can remember. But it is not the whole of reality. There is also the one who is watching. And that one, the watcher, the one who is aware, has been here the whole time, quiet and steady, never once appearing on the screen. The Zen tradition considers this the most important question a person can explore. Not because the answer is complicated. In fact, the answer may be the simplest thing there is. But because the looking itself, the turning of attention back toward its own source, changes everything. A Zen master was once asked by a student, "What is the most important thing?" The master said, "Who is the one asking?" The student paused. "I am." "Then that is the most important thing," the master said. "Find out who that is." Throughout this evening, we have been exploring what happens when we slow down. We have seen how listening becomes generous when we give it time. We have seen how the stories we tell about each other dissolve when we pause long enough to look again. We have sat with a traveler in a small room who discovered that suffering lives in the future, not in the present moment. We have watched an old man drink tea on a bench and find that just being here is enough. We have noticed the invisible map that keeps us in motion and felt the ancient hum that keeps us on guard. All of these teachings, different as they are, point in the same direction. They all point here, to this moment, to whatever is present right now, before we add anything to it, before we interpret it, or resist it, or try to make it into something else. And now, in this final stretch of our journey together, we arrive at the deepest question the Buddhist tradition has to offer. After all the pausing, after all the softening, after all the letting go, what remains? When we stop rushing and stop reacting and stop performing, who is still here? The Zen tradition has a practice called the backward step. It was named by the great Zen master Dogen, who lived in Japan many centuries ago. The backward step is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of reaching forward, instead of seeking the next experience, or the next insight, or the next accomplishment, we step back. We relax into what is already here. We stop trying to get somewhere, and instead, notice where we already are. This goes against everything we have been taught. Our whole lives, we have been trained to move forward, to seek, to strive, to reach for the next thing. The backward step asks us to do the opposite. It asks us to release the effort entirely and simply rest in what is present. This is different from the kind of meditation that aims to achieve a particular state. The backward step does not try to calm the mind or produce a feeling of peace or arrive at any destination. It simply rests in what is here. If the mind is busy, it rests in that. If the body is tense, it rests in that. If there is noise, it rests in that. It does not change anything. It simply notices with a kind of gentle curiosity, what is here when we stop adding? Dogen described it as turning the light around. Instead of shining the light of our attention outward, onto the world, onto our problems, onto our plans, we turn it around and shine it back toward the one who is looking. And what we find there, when we make this simple turn, is not what we expected. We expected to find a self, a person with a history and a set of qualities and a long list of worries. But what we actually find is something more open than that, something more spacious. We find awareness itself, without any particular shape, without any particular content, just the simple, clear fact of being present, being here, being awake. And what we find when we take this step is surprising. We find that this awareness does not need to be created. It does not need to be earned or achieved. It is the most basic fact of our existence. We are aware. Before any thought, before any feeling, before any experience, there is the simple fact that someone is here, noticing. That awareness is not something we do. It is something we are. Think of it this way. Right now, you are hearing sounds. Perhaps the sound of a voice, or of the room around you, or of silence itself. You are aware of those sounds. But the awareness that hears them is not one of the sounds. It is something else entirely. It is the space in which the sounds are happening. The sounds come and go. The awareness remains. The same is true of thoughts. Thoughts arise and pass, one after another, all day and all night. But the awareness that notices them is not a thought. It is what the thoughts are appearing in. It is the sky behind the weather. The same is true of feelings. Feelings rise and fall, sometimes gently, sometimes with great intensity. But the awareness that holds them is not a feeling. It is something steadier, something wider, something that does not come and go. This is what the Buddhist tradition calls our original nature. The Zen teachers sometimes call it the face you had before your parents were born, a poetic way of saying the awareness that is here before any story about who you are, before any identity, before any name or role or history. Just this. Just the fact of being aware. Just the openness in which everything is happening. The Buddha spoke of 3 gifts that come from learning to pause, from finding the still center in the middle of our spinning lives. The first gift is emotional healing. When we stop rushing and turn toward what we are feeling, even when what we are feeling is difficult, something begins to soften. We have touched on this throughout this evening. When we meet our experience with honesty rather than resistance, when we say it is like this and allow the moment to be what it is, the experience changes. It does not disappear, but it shifts. Pain that is met with presence becomes something we can hold. Grief that is held in awareness reveals, beneath its surface, a love that has not gone anywhere. Restlessness that is met with understanding loses its sharp edges. The heart heals, not because we fix it, but because we finally stop interfering with its natural movement toward wholeness. This healing is quiet work. It does not announce itself. It happens in the small spaces where we choose to stay rather than flee. A moment of discomfort, breathed into rather than avoided. A wave of sadness, allowed to come and allowed to go. Over time, these small acts of staying accumulate into something larger. A trust in our own capacity to meet what arises. A faith that we can bear what is here and that bearing it is not the same as suffering from it. The second gift is the capacity to love. When we slow down, we become available to the people around us in a way that busyness makes impossible. We stop performing and start being present. We stop preparing our next sentence and start hearing the one being spoken to us. We stop looking past the person in front of us and start seeing them. Love, the Buddhist tradition teaches, is not something we produce through effort. It is something that flows naturally when we remove what is blocking it. The rushing blocks it. The performing blocks it. The self-consciousness blocks it. But when these fall away, even briefly, what remains is a warmth that does not need to be manufactured. It is already here, already moving, already reaching toward the people in our lives. We just need to get out of its way. The third gift is the deepest. It is what the Zen tradition calls recognition. Not the recognition of something new, but the recognition of something that was always here. Our own awareness, our own presence, the simple, luminous fact of being. This is the gift the backward step reveals. The awareness in which the whole drama of our lives is playing out. The sky in which all the weather happens. And this sky, this awareness, has never been damaged by the weather. It has never been hurried or rushed or diminished. It has been here, steady and open, through every moment of our lives, waiting for us to notice. The Zen tradition speaks of this recognition with great simplicity. A master was once asked, "What is enlightenment?" He said, "When you are hungry, eat. When you are tired, sleep." The student was confused. "Everyone does that," he said. "How is that enlightenment?" "Most people," the master replied, "when they eat, do not simply eat. They think about 1,000 things while eating. When they sleep, they do not simply sleep. They worry while sleeping. The enlightened person just eats, just sleeps, just does whatever they are doing, completely, without adding anything. This is not a distant, unattainable state. This is what happens naturally when we stop adding to the moment. When we stop laying our stories and worries and plans on top of what is here. What remains is vivid. What remains is simple. What remains is alive. The Zen master Bankei used to tell his students, "Your mind is originally unborn and undying. It is not something that can be lost, because it was never gained. It is simply what you are." His students would argue with him. They would say, "But my mind is full of confusion and anger and desire." And he would say, "Yes. And what is it that is aware of the confusion? What is it that notices the anger? That awareness is your unborn mind. It has never been confused. It has never been angry. It has been here, clear and open, the entire time." This is the invitation of the backward step, to stop identifying with the contents of the mind and to rest in the awareness that holds them. The thoughts will continue. The feelings will continue. The hum will keep humming and the map will keep unfolding. But we are not the thoughts. We are not the feelings. We are not the hum or the map. We are the awareness in which all of it arises and passes. And that awareness is already free, already at peace, already home. You cannot hurry the heart toward this recognition. It cannot be forced or manufactured or achieved through effort. But the beautiful truth is that you do not need to hurry because the awareness is already here. It has always been here. You are not trying to find something that is hidden. You are trying to notice something that is so close, so constant, so present that you have been looking right through it your entire life. The Zen master Huang Po said it simply. People are afraid to forget their minds, fearing to fall through the void with nothing to hold on to. They do not know that the void is not really void, but the realm of the real. What he means is this. When we let go of our thoughts, when we stop clinging to our stories and our identities and our plans, we do not fall into nothing. We fall into everything. We fall into the vast, warm, open awareness that has been holding us all along. This is where all the teachings of this evening arrive. Every story, every reflection, every pause has been pointing here, to this simple recognition that the peace we have been looking for is not something we need to create. It is what we are. The woman who kept the gate at the old monastery knew this, in her way. She did not need to produce wisdom. She simply listened, and the wisdom was in the listening. The old man on the bench knew this. He did not need to fill his days with achievement. He simply sat, and the sitting was full. The woman who stopped rushing knew this. She did not need to hurry. The hurrying was what had been keeping her from the life that was already hers. The traveler on the mountain porch knew this, when the knot behind his ribs finally loosened, and he asked his old friend a single honest question. Each of them, in their own way, took the backward step. They stopped reaching for the next thing. They stopped performing. They stopped running. And what they found, right where they were, was more than enough. You cannot hurry the heart, but you were never asked to. The heart has its own pace, its own rhythm, its own quiet way of opening. And when it opens, what it finds is not something far away or hard to reach. It is this breath, this moment, this awareness that has been here, faithful and steady, through every experience of our lives, waiting for us to slow down enough to feel it. The Zen tradition has a final teaching that may be the gentlest of all. It says, "You are already home. You have always been home. You just forgot, for a while, to look around. Look around now. Feel this moment. Feel your own presence. And know that whatever you find here is enough. It has always been enough." Let us rest here, in this stillness, for as long as it lasts. There is nowhere else to be. There is nothing left to seek. Just this. Just here. Just the quiet fact of being alive, and being aware, and being home. There was once a young fish who had heard, from the older fish in the river, about something called the ocean. It was supposed to be vast and deep and beautiful beyond imagining. The young fish became consumed with the desire to find it. She swam upstream. She swam downstream. She asked every creature she met, "Where is the ocean? How do I get there?" Some pointed her in one direction. Some pointed her in another. Some told her the ocean did not exist and she should stop searching. She did not stop. She swam past reeds and over stones and through currents that pulled her sideways. She swam through cold water and warm water and water so still it felt like glass. She swam until her fins ached and then she swam further. Because the ocean was out there somewhere, and she was going to for many days. The river widened. The banks grew further apart. The water changed color. But she did not feel like she had arrived anywhere. She still felt like a fish in a river, searching. She met a frog sitting on a lily pad. "Do you know where the ocean is?" she asked. "I have heard of it," the frog said, "but I have never been there. I think it is very far from here." She swam on. She swam through seasons. She swam through rain and through sunlight and through long, quiet nights when the stars reflected on the surface above her. She grew older. She grew tired, and still the ocean was nowhere to be found. One day, exhausted and beginning to wonder if the whole search had been a mistake, she came upon an old turtle resting on a rock in the shallows. "Please," she said, "I have been swimming my whole life, looking for the ocean. Can you tell me where it is?" The turtle looked at her for a long time. He did not seem to be in any hurry to answer. Then he said, gently, "My dear, you are in it." "That is not possible," she said. "This is just water." "Yes," the turtle said, "it is just water, and the ocean is just water. You have been swimming in it since the day you were born." The fish was quiet. She looked around. The water she had been swimming through her entire life, the water she breathed, the water she slept in, the water that held her and carried her and surrounded her on every side, that was the ocean. It had always been the ocean. She had been searching for the thing she had never left. "But if I have been in it the whole time," she said slowly, "then why could I not feel it?" "Because you were swimming too fast," the turtle said. The fish floated there for a long time. She felt the water around her, really felt it for the first time. It was warm. It was gentle. It was holding her up without being asked. She had spent her whole life racing through this, chasing something she imagined was grander, more beautiful, more complete than what she already had. And what she already had was the ocean. "What do I do now?" she asked the turtle. He closed his eyes and settled deeper onto his rock. "Now," he said, "you swim. The same as before. But this time, you know where you are." We spend so much of our lives searching for peace, for meaning, for a feeling of home. We rush from one experience to the next, one practice to the next, one promise to the next, always believing that what we are looking for is somewhere ahead of us, somewhere we have not yet arrived. But the Buddhist tradition, the Zen masters, the Buddha himself, they all point to the same quiet truth. You are already in it. The peace you are seeking is the awareness you are seeking it with. The home you are longing for is the ground you are standing on. The love you are reaching for is the heart that is doing the reaching. You cannot hurry toward what is already here. You can only slow down enough to notice it. Tonight we walked a long and quiet road together. We sat with a gatekeeper who listened without hurry and taught a young boy that presence is the deepest form of generosity. We shared a bowl with a stranger at a crossroads inn and discovered that the stories we tell about each other are often more fiction than fact. We lay in a small room with a fever and found that the present moment, met with honesty, held more stillness than we expected. We drank tea with an old man who had stopped rushing and found that just being here, just this, was more than enough. We looked at the invisible map we all carry, the one that tells us peace is always one stop ahead, and we met a weaver who learned to set the loom down and feel the ground beneath her feet. We sat with a woman who had one season and no time to rush, and watched as her ordinary life revealed itself to be extraordinary. We felt the ancient hum that keeps us watchful and learned to meet it with kindness rather than frustration. We sat beneath a tree through a long night and found the space between every impulse and every reaction, the space where freedom lives. We slowed down enough to let love in, on a mountain porch, between two old friends who remembered how to simply be together. And in the end, we turned around and asked the simplest question of all, who is here? And what we found was not something new. It was something that had been present all along. The awareness behind every thought, the stillness beneath every sound, the open, quiet heart that was waiting patiently for us to stop rushing long enough to feel it. Each of these teachings, different as they are, circles the same center. The gatekeeper and the turtle are saying the same thing. The old man on the bench and the Buddha beneath the tree are pointing in the same direction. The woman with one season and the weaver who set down her loom both discovered the same truth. It is here. It was always here. The only thing that kept us from it was the speed at which we were moving. The Buddhist tradition does not ask us to become different people. It does not ask us to leave our lives behind or retreat to a monastery or sit for hours in silence. It asks something much simpler and, in its own way, much harder. It asks us to be where we are, fully, without rushing to the next place, without adding a story about how this moment should be different. Just here, just this. And when we do that, even briefly, even for a single breath, something shifts. The world does not change, but we do. We soften, we settle, we find that the ground we are standing on has been solid all along. The fish spent her whole life looking for the ocean. We spend hours looking for peace. And the answer, in both cases, is the same. It is not somewhere else. It is here. It has always been here. We are swimming in it right now. You cannot hurry the heart, but you do not need to. The heart is already beating. The breath is already moving. The awareness is already awake. All that is left is to rest in what is already true and to let this moment, just as it is, be enough. May the teachings of this evening settle into you gently. May the stories stay with you as long as they are useful and then dissolve like morning fog when they are no longer needed. May you carry with you, if nothing else, the quiet permission to slow down, to pause, to be here, to trust that the ocean has been holding you all along. And if you remember only one thing from tonight, let it be this: you do not need to search for what you already are. You do not need to hurry toward what is already here. You are the ocean. You have always been the ocean. And all that is left is to rest in that knowing and to let it carry you wherever you need to go. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.